Are people really buying homes over the asking price? Yes. Yes, they are. As I mentioned on my video on Monday, I had a couple listings that received multiple offers, and both of those are over the asking price. But I also have some data that I'm going to show you as it relates to that. So, as unbelievable as it sounds, let's get into it and walk through what's going on in Phoenix. Happy Friday, everybody. We're going to take a look at a few different things, just some data that I thought was interesting to track. I haven't taken a look at these graphs in a bit, and so just to pull them up and see what's going on, I found this a little bit interesting. So this is the average list price per square foot for active listings. And what I was surprised to see about this chart is the pink line is where we're at today, and then the greenish line is where we were at last year. Why is the average list price per square foot tracking with the average list price per square foot of last year? I was surprised to see that. I definitely thought that our list prices, so these are homes that are listed for sale, would be showing a lower number this year than it was last year. But I guess our sellers are still putting their homes up for sale at the same price as they were last year or close to it. Now, obviously, the pink line's fallen just a little bit, but I mean, we're tracking pretty closely there and still way above 2021. So that's a list price, right? That doesn't really matter because it only matters if someone buys it for that. So let's see what the under contract list price looks like. And we can see this has been higher than where we were at a year ago. Therefore, you can assume that possibly the closed prices are going to be higher than where we were at a year ago. And we just got that data for closed sales saying that the month of February actually had an increase in median sales price. So this has been tracking appropriately. And I just found this interesting because we do have so much turmoil going on in the financial sector right now. There's a lot of concern and uncertainty and talk of recession, and interest rates for mortgages are higher than they've been historically, or at least in the last 2 years, which has dampened our demand. But we're still seeing a lot of strength in the market, at least for the start of the year. So I found this to be kind of interesting to really just see where we stand as we start the year. And again, with this, we're quite a bit higher than 2021, which is not surprising, but we'll see where the list price per square foot for under contracts goes on this pink line. It does not look like it's continuing to increase, but it'll be something interesting to track. So let's also look at the listing success rate, because this was just dismal at the end of last year. We were tanking, listings were not selling, and we came from a high of 92.5, 92.6 maybe was the peak there, kind of hard to tell, of listings being successful when they were listed on the market and actually sold. We went all the way down to, looks like the lowest was right about here at about 62%. Nope, went a little bit lower at the start of the year, 61%. January is typically going to be a little bit slower anyway. But then we had like a huge increase here, and today we're sitting at about 78.3%. And why, for a frame of reference, let's just look at 2014, because that was our last truly balanced market. 15 and 16 before we were really getting into sellers market territory. And we're doing better than we were then, just by a slight amount. But the listing success rate has proven to be pretty strong lately. So that makes a little bit more sense when you see that listing success rate and know that we also have homes selling over the list price. So let's look at that. Closings per month above the list price. We have 15.5% of closings in March going over the asking price. I don't know. It's surprising. It's surprising when all you hear that there's price cuts and, homes aren't selling. Well, homes are selling, and some of them are selling above the asking price. Now, is this May of 2022? No, absolutely not. We don't have more than half of the listings going over the asking price. And it looks like June of 2021 may have been the record that we set, where we had 60% of sales going over the list price. Just wild. But now 15.5%. And again, let's look back in history to that 2014 range. And that was 13%. So we're even higher than we were then. Obviously, we went down quite a bit, 13%, 12%. I mean, it's very hard to think that even last year in the fall, when things were so slow, we still had folks going over the listing price. But you have to consider what's also going on. What are some of the other factors? So one of those things being that perhaps someone priced their home really competitively, knowing how challenging the market was. And so over the list price just meant it was being sold for a fair price, right? So that could be a contributing factor. In addition, there are a lot of seller concessions happening. So even though that sales price looks high, or it looks like someone bid above the asking price, they might be getting a 3% concession back from the seller. Therefore, you kind of have to adjust the price accordingly. So speaking of that, let's look at seller concessions, which are about 47% today. And I'll see if I can make this a little bit bigger so we can see. This is clearly a big difference here between what we were seeing in the frenzied market. Of course, no one was getting seller concessions at that time. But even going back to 2015, we're quite a bit higher than that. So you can see that sellers have really relied on providing those concessions to buyers in order to get a deal done. So we have almost 50% of sales having some sort of seller concession. So you really have to factor that in too. Homes may be selling over the list price, but we also have a lot more seller concessions going on. So it's not maybe quite as alarming as it sounds. Also wanted to point out, let's just see what price ranges are having the most sales over list price. And it looks like here we are between the 250 to 300 range at 22%. And then just close second there, 300 to 400 and 200 to 250. So definitely the lower price ranges is where we're seeing that. It's a little bit more competitive because there are more buyers that can qualify in that range, and therefore you tend to see some people being a bit more competitive. And then as far as the median over list price, it looks like the largest amount here was 200,000, but that is in the 2 million range. So that is a whole different ball game there. But we're seeing probably the median around, let's see, this goes from 3 to 7,000, probably about 5,000 over list. And I remember back in the frenzy at one point, I think we were at 20 or 25,000 over the list price was the median amount. That's median. That means 50% of people were paying more than 20,000 over list price in order to lock in that transaction. So we've come a long way since then, and to a much healthier spot, might I add. So let's also look at the contract ratio, because this is something that really helps us understand where the market is trending. And so if you're not familiar, the Cromford Report has a contract ratio, which is looking at the amount of listings on the market that are active for sale as compared to the number of listings that are already under contract. So it really measures the heat in the market. This is not seasonally adjusted, so we see a lot of fluctuation in these numbers. And you can see here we're sitting at about 63.8, which is much higher than where we were at towards the end of last year. We got pretty low here, and 63.8, I believe they consider, I don't know if they have their little chart up there, but I believe they consider once you hit 60 to be a hot market, if I'm not mistaken. And what I find interesting, and I've shown you guys this before, but let's take a look at it again. They have the heat map, and there is a way for me to play this and see the progression since the beginning of the year and where we're at today. We're not going to go back to 2014 because that will take forever for us to watch all of that. But let's go back to December 31st. And let's just see how this map changed over time from December 31st till today. Now you can see over here, okay, balanced warm, anything over 60 is hot. So I was correct on that. And then you can see these colors, right? So all the blue and green is definitely the colder, balanced market. And then as you get into yellows, oranges, reds, all of that becomes a little bit more of a warmer, hotter market frenzy, if you will. So let's see where we've gone since January. You can start to see some oranges and reds coming in February and beginning of March. And then here we are today. We've got a lot more in that 80 to 100 hotter range and 60 to 80 hot range. So we've definitely seen an increase, which also makes sense when you start looking at that data of home selling over the asking price. It's really a mix of what's going on right now, and it's very hard to make a blanket statement on what's going on in the Phoenix market. And then active listings, let's just take a look at this because one of the things that's really holding us back is our inventory. And I hear a lot about people saying that inventory is at all-time highs, and I've talked about this before, and to really kind of correct the record, it is not. We're at about 14,000 listings on the market right now. And last year when we had our surge, we hit 20,000, which I love to compare to where we were at back in 2007 before the crash, and we were at 56,000 listings. So in comparison, 14,000 is not an oversupply for our market, and the 20,000 that we saw last summer was not an oversupply either. It was just a major change coming from all-time lows to getting as high as we did at that 20,000 range. So that's where we stand with inventory, and that's one of the things that's really holding us back from seeing a big, drastic crash in our market is we just don't have the inventory. We don't have people listing their homes quickly. Now I know people always talk about new construction supply, and I did a video on that, so you may want to check that out, talking about the number of permits that we have and what that absorption rate looks like. And truthfully there, I'm not seeing an oversupply of homes in that situation either. So we'll see what happens. As I mentioned, there's so much going on right now in the economy, in the banking system, interest rates, inflation. All of that stuff is super important to pay attention to because it could affect where we end up. But hopefully this was helpful to give you a little status check on what's going on. And if you want, a little tip to share with people, you can certainly say homes are selling over the asking price, only about 16%, but they are out there. So I hope everyone has a great weekend, and I'll see you guys on Monday with another market update. I'm Caitlin McKeag with the Desert Dreamers team.